commented on that characterization. And joining me now, MSNBC contributor Malcolm Nance, Sarah Kendzior, scholar of authoritarian states, and Scott Dworkin, senior advisor for the Democratic Coalition Against Trump. Scott, I'm going to go to you on this first. Devin Nunes was forced to recuse himself for several reasons, and here are three that were put out this past spring. He briefed the Trump campaign on intelligence matters during the campaign. He was on Trump's transition team, and he fielded calls from foreign leaders trying to reach Michael Flynn. As a result, it's very possible that Nunes' conversations were also incidentally collected by U.S. intelligence agencies and recorded as part of other investigations. How is it possible that somebody with that background, who was part of the Trump transition team, now gets access to all of these documents with which he can pursue his investigation of Fusion GPS?
Well, Trump opens up the door for corruption, and so it becomes more normalized, even though this is not normal. It's really tough to believe that somebody like Speaker Ryan, who I used to have respect for, would step out and defend Nunes when he came out and publicly said that Nunes would be recusing himself, and he turned out to be a liar, and now he should go to prison for it. That's how I feel about Speaker Ryan, and we used to be close enough where I'd trust him. That trust no longer exists, and so I'm not sure where we're going to find a patriot within the Republican Party, because I'm not sure if there's any left, and it's terrifying to see someone like Paul Ryan step out and go against our justice system and side with a traitor like Devin Nunes. It's completely unbelievable at this point.
And Malcolm, I mean, this is somebody who was not just sort of an incidental member of the Trump team. He was on the executive committee of the Trump transition team, Devin Nunes was. He had that secret White House meeting, if you remember that, before the Trump monitoring claim, where he was running sort of intel back and forward between his contacts in the NSC and the U.S. intelligence agencies and the White House. How is it possible that somebody like Devin Nunes is allowed to see whatever intelligence he wants, whatever backup information he wants, and then essentially use that to persecute a former British spy who's on our side?
Well, he does hold the position as the chair on the House Intelligence Committee. He has, he's authorized to have access to that information. He can do what he wants with that information. And Speaker Ryan has now backed him up and shown that he has confidence in his position as committee chairman. That being said, if he were to use that intelligence, any information, to carry out a witch hunt or to carry out any type of investigation with the specific intent to block or obstruct justice in the Mueller investigation, that could expose Devin Nunes to obstruction of justice charges himself. He could be an indicted or unindicted co-conspirator if it turns out that he is using his position, his congressionally appointed position and his electoral office in order to thwart a national counterintelligence investigation and to stop the Justice Department from doing their job. I don't know what's in Devin Nunes' mind. I'm going to give him benefit of the doubt. He's a politician. He wants to play politics. That's great. But if he takes that step to where he is an active participant in blocking information or trying to discredit witnesses in this national counterintelligence investigation, I think he has set himself to a very dangerous position. And
Sarah, you study authoritarian states. This is what you do. This is your field of study. It's hard, I think, for a lot of people to understand why someone like Devin Nunes, I don't know, maybe he knew Donald Trump before. It's not clear what their personal relationship was, but would have such fierce loyalty to Donald Trump that he seems to be conducting his own counter-investigation to try to go after Donald Trump's enemies and essentially exculpate him from the Russia investigation. Is it logical that someone would do that if the only person he's trying to clear is Donald Trump, or is it an indication that he is worried about his own exposure because, again, he was part of the campaign?
Yeah, I think it's more likely that it's the latter, that he's worried about himself. I mean, throughout this process, Nunes has never operated as a watchdog. He's been a lapdog. And the difference now is that in March, he expressed some shame and some contrition for his actions because they had been outed as inappropriate. Now we've moved into a new era of shamelessness. And we see this not just with Nunes, but with the Republicans in general. They started out stonewalling and kind of ignoring the investigation. Then they were denying that anything had occurred. And now they're in this, blatantly partisan process of trying to flip this thing on its head, trying to say that, yes, there were bad things with the FBI, there were bad things with Russia, but it was the Democrats, it was Hillary Clinton, it was Christopher Steele. They're creating villains out of the people who actually tried to stop this process, who tried to stop collusion and corruption within our government. And so, that's a very dangerous thing to witness.
And Scott, to that very point, you have Republican senators who have now asked the Department of Justice to weigh charges against Christopher Steele, who is the author of the dossier that drives Donald Trump so crazy. A source familiar with the committee's investigation said that the referral stems from at least one statement Steele made to the FBI about the timing of discussions with journalists about the contents of the dossier. So nothing to do with alleged lying to the FBI, but you have people like Lindsey now saying they want to investigate a former intelligence officer from our closest ally in the world, Great Britain. What is going on here?
It's interesting that they would go after him like that because we've trusted this guy for decades. As a British intel officer, I believe that he did a lot of work with Russia, and we trusted that intelligence, and we've worked with the UK. So I'm astounded by the fact that they're basically attacking British intelligence services at this point, but at the same time, they're attacking our own. So why wouldn't they attack other countries now? And so if they're going to work, they're probably going to spread this out through Europe and their intelligence services to try and discredit them as proof comes out of conspiracy between the Trump administration and the Trump campaign and Trump transition and conspiring against the United States.
And you also have, Sarah, what seems to be, at least to the layperson, persecution of Fusion GPS, the company that was hired first by a Republican, conservatives, and then passed on to the Democrats and to the DNC. And you've now had, this is what Fusion GPS themselves said. They did an op-ed this week in which they said, we found widespread evidence that Mr. Trump and his organization had worked with a wide array of dubious Russians in arrangements that often raised questions about money laundering. Likewise, these deals don't seem to interest Congress. One more thing that they said. After a year of investigations into Donald Trump's ties to Russia, the only person Republicans seek to accuse of wrongdoing is one who reported on these matters to law enforcement in the first place. Publicizing a criminal referral based on classified information raises serious questions about whether this letter is nothing more than an attempt to discredit government sources in the midst of an ongoing criminal investigations. And they're saying that only their bank records are being subpoenaed by people like Devin Nunes. What is that about?
I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying before, that they're attempting, to flip this. It's as if, our government is on fire and they're yelling at the people who called the fire alarm. And, the founders of GPS for Congress to release more information about this, to have greater transparency. And I think that that's extremely important because I think a lot of things are getting lost in this discussion because the magnitude of these crimes is so great. You have money laundering, you have potentially treason, you have obstruction of justice. And so I think, and you also have, crimes that go back something like 30 years in terms of illicit engagements with various Russian nationals, with oligarchs, with Trump's businesses. It's very complicated. And Steele, in his dossier, put that all into perspective, showed the connections between these various components. And I think that's something that needs to be laid out as plainly and clearly as possible to the American people. I think that all the information needs to be out there, and a lot of it is already in the public domain. A lot of the most damning things have come straight from Trump's mouth, have come from tweets and emails that Donald Trump Jr. posted online. It's out there, but I do think that it needs to be out there in an official capacity, and I think that it's something that should be, discussed through hearings and through other, venues for the public.
Yeah, indeed. Fusion GPS, the two founders, did 21 hours of congressional testimony, and they've asked for it all to be released. Malcolm, I'll come to you on this same, similar question that I asked to Sarah. Can you conceive of a reason of partisanship alone being the explanation for why so many Republicans who are in positions of authority, in investigative authority, literally seeming to go out of their way to try to defend Donald Trump by what looks like persecuting the messengers here? Right. Is it just partisanship at work, or should we, be thinking a little bit more darkly?
I can't recall who said this on Twitter, but it was a brilliant statement where they said, the Constitution and this system of government was designed to confront and restrain tyrannical leaders who decided they wanted to act like a monarchy. But it was not designed to operate without a working Congress and separation of. We have a very serious problem here.